you to our first Blue Ribbon Task Force on taking a look at student devices and screen time and its effect on adolescents, and also taking a look at district-owned devices. I'm Randy Watson, Commissioner of Education. I want to thank you for volunteering to serve on this important task force. And today, of course, share some information with you and a little bit about how we'll proceed going forward. And so I will share my screen, making my screens larger so I can see. Hopefully you can see my screen. And so the purpose of the Blue Ribbon Task Force is to develop guidance, recommendations based on research on students' personal devices and that use in school, screen time and its effect on mental health, and parental oversight of district-owned devices. I might add that this guidance and recommendations will go to the State Board of Education. They may decide to take your guidance exactly as is, or they may modify it, or they may decide they're not going to use it at all. That will be their purview. They've commissioned this task force. This is not meant, though, to be mandates to school districts. This will provide guidance to school districts so their local boards and their parents and students can make their decisions. These recommendations will be presented to the State Board for consideration in November, with possible action in December. These are live meetings. We are broadcasting live, and whoops, excuse me, I won't go that fast. And so just a couple things to remind you all of is that these are open meetings, so they're being streamed live. Anything that you say will not only go out, but will be recorded. That includes dropping something in the chat, so just know that. As you participate, it is most beneficial, if at all possible, unless you're happen to be traveling, to in Zoom etiquette, to have your camera on so people can interact. Here we are talking about screen time, and we're meeting via screen time. There's something a little ironic about that. But the best we can do is then hope to have at least video and audio. We will have. We'll do some introductions in just a second of some of our staff, and also we have a very tight timeline to get this to the State Board. So our meetings are going to go very strictly according to time, and three will be the primary people organizing the events for you and conducting the events, and then helping put together much of the discussion notes as we go forward. We'll also, when we break into small groups, have some other people that will be assisting from our staff. You also have the State Board Secretary, Deborah. I'm looking across my screen here, kind of like Brady Bunch screen, to see if Deborah is on. And yes, thank you, Deborah. She will be then taking the notes, putting out those minutes of the meetings so that you have access to that. And then Michaela will be handling the technology and getting us all into our groups, sessions, etc. As we go forward there. Let me come back to the Zoom. Our meeting cadence will be, we will start promptly at 4 o'clock, and we're going to do our darndest to get you out at 5:30 every time. That may run just a couple minutes longer. We hope it never runs more than 5 minutes longer. We respect your time. You're volunteering for this work, and we thank you. The cadence will always be, we start at 4, we will conduct some research. We will share with you some research. We will have presenters or a panel of presenters that will present to you kind of practical applications or more around that research. And then every session, we will break you into 6 breakout rooms of approximately 6 each, where you can discuss what the presenters have given and what the research has been given, along with our assignments each week. And then we'll come out of that those discussions, have a brief overview back with us, with all of us, and then we will hope to end at 5:30. A little bit of what of the schedule, and you can see it's chunked into early on into three large chunks. The first two meetings, we're going to be talking about personal devices in schools, including today. And then we're going to shift to screen time and mental health, two sessions on that. And then two sessions on parental oversight and school-owned devices. And then some collective action between the group on the next two sessions. And then on the 17th and the 24th will be some flexible, what do we need maybe to revisit, or what more do you want to hear about? So as we get closer to that time, we will be seeking your feedback around those topics. On the 31st, yes, that is Halloween, so we took that into account. There will be no meeting, but there will start to be taking a look at the draft of the report that all of you will have input on and drafting. That report gets finalized by this group on the 7th, and then that report will be presented by the co-chairs to the state board. Recommendations, as I mentioned, in December. So again, short time frame, but this board wants to get this done before the calendar year is out. They think it's really important, and they're excited about doing that work. Again, I want to thank you for volunteering to do this work. We think it's really important work, and we couldn't be happier that you decided to give your time for it. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Peyton, and she's going to walk you through, along with Gabby, some of the purpose content of the final report and a little bit of the role of all the task members. So Peyton?
Okay, hi everybody. I just want to give a little bit of context about what that final report looks like. So, Gabby, Jake, and I, throughout all of these meetings, are going to be taking pretty detailed notes along with Deborah. And so, we are all four going to be comparing those at the end of every meeting, trying to make sure that we really capture exactly what it is you guys want us to get in this final report. So what that might look like at the end is a set of recommendations for the State Board of Education, a set of recommendations for local boards of education, for each for districts, for teachers. So there could be a variety of different ways that we do that. And then building out some of those recommendations based on the research that we do in the reading, and then what we hear from the panelists and presenters that we get along the way. So, like I said, we really want to make sure that we're capturing accurately what it is that you guys want to see at the end of this. And we'll do that through those breakout discussions. So we want to make sure that at the end of those, if you have something that you really think needs to be heard and written down, that we're able to get that from you.
Very briefly too, as your staff, we really think it's our role to be at your service. So to us, that means that we're available to help facilitate the meeting structure. We're going to help develop the written report on the task force's findings and recommendations. We'll help prepare that background research, answer your questions, and then provide some follow-up. So we'll also maintain meetings that will be posted on our website. We do have a dedicated email address for the task force as well that I'm just going to drop in the chat, that if you ever need anything, you can reach us.
Thank you, Peyton and Gabby, and again, we appreciate their service to all of you and helping with this work. What I'd like to do now is introduce to you the co-chairs of this Blue Ribbon Task Force. First, from Mission Valley High School, Ava Gustin. Ava, good to see you, and thank you for being co-chair. And Brian Houghton, who's the principal at Fredonia Junior Senior High School. Brian, thank you for agreeing to co-chair. They will lead you through kind of the sequence going on from this point on. So I will turn it over to the two of you.
Thank you, Dr. Watson. Ava, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick?
She is having a little bit of trouble getting on Zoom. So Brian, if you
Oh,
can
sure,
do that
absolutely.
first, I'm trying to make sure she can get on.
No problem. Thank you, Peyton. My name is Brian Houghton, and I am the principal of Fredonia Junior Senior High School in southeast Kansas. We are just about an hour and a half outside of Wichita. Excuse me. It's my privilege to work with all of you during this experience. We are really exploring student engagement and looking at the use of technology, personal devices, cell phones, mental health inside of our school systems. And as we do so, when this opportunity came about, it was just really a calling for me to jump into this and learn with all of you guys and be able to hopefully help craft something that helps all of our systems work a little bit better.
Thanks, Brian. And again, Hayden's working feverishly trying to get Ava on the Zoom. So we'll hope that she joins us soon.
Okay.
But I think what we can do is
Dr. Watson, we do have Ava.
oh,
She was
okay.
able to join.
All right, Ava. Well, glad we got the technology working right since this is a study on technology, and we're just doing an introduction. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, my technology was not working. My name is Ava Gustin, and I'm a student at Mission Valley High School, which is located in Northeast Kansas. And I'm going to be a senior this year. In my free time, I love to garden as well as to hang out with animals.
Thanks, Ava. So we've just been going through some of the overview of what we're going to be about. And I think now, Ava, we're going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Watson. We're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is a review of our research.
Okay, so I will go ahead and go over the research on this week's topic. I am going to work on sharing my screen here. Give me 1 second. Okay, so when we look at the perceived impact of cell phone use on children, um, this study surveyed parents asking how they felt about the impact of cell phone use on their children. So about 48% of parents found that cell phones were either entirely or mostly positive, had an entirely or mostly positive impact on their kids. 43% saying that they think it's about equally positive and negative impact, and only 9% saying that it's either mostly or entirely negative on their children. So I know that this is something that really is just perception based, but I think a lot of times in research that you find, some of those things might not quite match up. So when you're reading articles online, it sometimes seems like, oh, parents really think that cell phones are bad because that's what a lot of articles will tell you. But, kind of looking at these numbers, it might be that a few parents think things are bad. And then that's just what gets uh, put into the news. So uh, there was that, and then we can move on to this next one. So how distracting are cell phones in school? I'll go through the student perception and then the teacher perception. So we just got kind of the parents' point of view, but this study talks about that 30% of students said that they got distracted by their digital devices in every or most of their mathematics lessons. and about 21% said that they get distracted by other students in every or most of their mathematics lessons. And we'll compare that to this next slide, which is the perception from teachers. So about 33% of teachers, public K-12 teachers, say that students being distracted by their cell phones is a major problem in their classroom. But that changes a lot as you go through the different age categories. So elementary, only 6% of teachers are saying that that's a major issue. But at the high school level, a really big majority, 72%, would say that that's a major problem in their classroom. So comparing the perception from the teachers to the students, I think is another interesting bit of data that we might want to look at.
Thank you, Peyton. Peyton will be able to present research to us each week on a topic that we feel is important for discussion. So we really appreciate all of your time and effort.
All right, thank you, Ava. We're now going to have more in-depth discussion on the research at the end of the meeting after we have concluded the panel. I want to take a moment and introduce our panelists that we have with us tonight. Katie Barrientos is a math teacher from Goddard USD 265. Ron Berry is the superintendent of Halstead Bentley USD 440. And Tyler Applegate is the vice principal at Chanute USD 413. We appreciate all of you guys being with us this afternoon and sharing your expertise.
As Brian said, I am a math teacher at Goddard High School. I've been in public education for 3 years, but I've been teaching for 10 years, been a teacher and a coach. So this spring, I read the book called The Anxious Generation, which I would imagine many of you guys in here, if you haven't read it, you have probably at least heard about it. And I knew technology and phones and social media had been damaging our teens, but this book just totally opened my eyes, and it lit something inside of me that made me feel so strongly that I needed to take action in my district, in my school, in the state, just about education, that the harmful effects that these phones, this social media is having on our kids, it's detrimental. And if we don't do something about it, it's going to be something that we can't turn around. I was able to present to my faculty before school started about some of the things that I found. We do have a phone policy in our school, but in my opinion, it's not very well enforced. And so my goal there was just to educate them and encourage them that this is something worth fighting for. It's something to fight the students on, to get their phones to put away. So kind of my passion this year, my goal this year is just education. I am wanting to educate anybody and everybody I possibly can about all the things that I have been learning and continue to learn.
That's awesome, Katie. Thank you very much. Ron, would you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Ron Berry. I'm a superintendent here at USD 440 Halstead Bentley, as you said. This is my 6-year superintendency here and 19th now total in education. Had a passion for educational technology since being in the classroom. Kind of was a leader in that, and actually at one point in time before Facebook was had even really gotten big, we had a Facebook post between Enlightenment thinkers when I was teaching in class, and what would they say to each other. And so have always had a passion for it. When I became superintendent, unfortunately I started the year that COVID came about, but I kind of worked with that passion and the fact that we weren't a one-to-one district at that point in time, and we had to quickly turn to that. I have a belief that creativity and ownership into that creativity for students is important, and these tools can assist students with that. We've been very successful with implementation, and the fact that we had 2 staff members who were recognized by Apple as Apple Distinguished Educators in the same year last year. At the same time, I have a unique perspective because we did adopt a cell phone policy a year ago, last school year, and have been able to see kind of some of the impacts that it has had in our school systems. It's been added at a handbook level and not a board policy level, but I think that there are value in technology and devices, but yet there are some concerns that obviously everyone probably has within this group, within personal devices and potentially social media and things of that nature. So
Thank you, Ron. Next up, we have Tyler.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Tyler Applegate, assistant principal here at Chanute High School, also in Southeast Kansas. And this is my sixth ban on cell phones in the high school. And before that, it was kind of up to teacher discretion. And we've seen some improvements in behavior, drama between students, and bullying, and an increase actually in social interactions in the lunchroom and in the hallways. So we've seen some good things there. We don't have any hard data at the moment, but a lot of observation from staff. So things have gone really well, but that's kind of where we're at here in Chanute.
Well, all right, thank you, Tyler. Next up, we have a couple of questions insight on before we open questions from the rest of the task force. First up, I'd like to know what role do teachers play in the enforcement of personal device policies, and how do you guys support them in this role?
Well, I can step in a little bit on that. Teachers, staff in general are 100% have a huge buy-in and a huge impact on the how these policies go. How we support them in Chanute here, with us having a ban and teachers being, empowered, instructed to, to enforce that in their classrooms and in the hallways and everything. We back them up on it. We take their word for everything on that, which we do with most things anyway. But then we are the ones that make the phone calls home. We're the ones that deal with the parents. We catch the blowback on that if there is any. It's actually been very good from our community. Very few. I mean, in 3 years, I can only think of one or two really upset parents. But teachers are they're on the front line. I can't be the one out there going into every room finding it. So it's got to be a teacher that if they see something, they've got to enforce it. And that we all know goes with every policy, with everything that we do in a school. So
from a teacher perspective on this, in my school, we don't have a complete ban. It's more classroom by classroom and up to the teacher to enforce it. And I feel my administration absolutely has our back, but I also do feel like my administration is very hesitant to take more drastic steps, such as a bell-to-bell ban from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. I know that I've had conversations with my principal that he's had the police called on him by parents before because they confiscated a phone from a student, and he's very well aware of the battles that he's had to face. And I mean, he always has the teachers' backs, but I know there's one quote from the Anxious Generation book from a teacher who said, give teachers a chance and ban cell phones. That I know in my classroom, my students are very well aware that the second they step in my room, they're not allowed to have their phone in their hands. There's no warnings, but you walk next door and it's totally different. And it's just like classroom management. I mean, it's definitely teacher to teacher whenever there's not a school-wide, I would say, consistent policy.
Yeah, I would agree with both Katie and Tyler in the fact that the teachers are the first line of defense, right, or offense with regard to policies, depending on how you want to look at it. And it's the case for us too. And we have a unique system, not 100% ban. They're allowed during lunch and passing period at the high school. The middle schools, they should be kept in their lockers, but where really your policy is only as good as your staff is willing to enforce, like both have said. And if you don't have that complete teacher buy-in, then all you do is potentially create more problems within your system, both for students. If I can get away with it for 70% of my day, but 30% I can't, it creates confusion. And then difficulty for teachers too. That professionalism that my peer next to me may not be doing things the way that I feel like they should be, and it could create conflict as a result between staff members and potentially even hurt culture too. So that buy-in, that collective efficacy is important when developing your policy and putting it forth. So
Thank you, guys.
I have a question from a high school perspective. So I'm going to be a senior this year, and I know, Katie, you mentioned sometimes parents get really upset when their students' phones are taken away. So I have some kids in my class, since I'm a senior, that are already 18. And I didn't know if there were any legality issues with that, with having 18-year-olds that are no longer minors, like with taking away their phones, or if that was just kind of school policy that they fall under the handbook as well.
That's a great question that I'm not sure I know the answer to. I'm sure I could find it. We've got a wonderful police force here at my school. I would, my gut tells me that if it's in our handbook, that it's an understood rule. I mean, just like anything else. I mean, if there's another prohibited item that you can't have at school and it was confiscated and it's in the handbook, like I said, I would need to probably check on that, but my gut would say whether they're 18 or not, I wouldn't think that would a legality issue would be there.
Uh, One of the things that we all work towards in schools is creating a positive school culture. And as you guys have implemented these bans and policies inside of your school, how has that impacted the student culture, and how have the teachers reacted? Has that improved teacher morale and more confidence in their ability to teach without students being distracted?
Yeah, I would say that ours, especially the way we implemented our ban, was kind of a collaborative effort. Turns out there'd been many different pockets of people kind of talking about the need to kind of look into this. And there were some connections made, and all of a sudden it was like, let's do this. And part of that was a student group, actually. We had a teacher that teaches a leadership class at our high school, and they'd done a unit on kind of time management and things, and they started looking at their screen time on their phones, and it was crazy how much some of these high school students were spending on their phones in a given day. And so we ended up kind of partnering with them, and our some of our gifted students put together a presentation. We ended up showing a documentary. Some of you might have heard of it, The Social Dilemma. If you haven't, it's more about social media and whatnot, but that ties in obviously to much of the usage of cell phones. And so we ended up showing that as a school-wide instance in some small groups in our advisory classes, and really, really went well. We had students that created debriefing questions for that, and then our students every year kind of do some refreshers as to why we're doing this. And teachers, and to the last point there, the question about distractedness or in the classroom, teachers feel much better about having a standalone building wide policy. It's not just me and the guy down the hallway is much more lenient. It's not a conflict between teachers. It's not a contest there. And so they all get to kind of follow the same thing now. And it works pretty well, again, as long as we enforce it.
So me being in a school that doesn't have a technically complete ban, after I gave my presentation this fall, I had so many teachers approach me, and just as passionate as I am, that they would really love to see a more strict and continuous ban among the whole school. And I think all of the teachers agree that when there is a school-wide expectation, once again, as long as it's followed, just the camaraderie and the culture among teachers has helped. I know when there's a ban, so for example, in my homeroom class, I'll call it my homeroom class yesterday, they were with me all day, and I told them, I said, guys, you're not going to have your phones at all. Just warning you, letting you know. And then we had different activities. There was some downtime. And although it was a little bit of a battle at first, just the conversations, just about nothing, but they don't have, a lot of them have this time to just sit and visit anymore, because as soon as they have a free moment, they're staring at a screen and in some virtual universe somewhere. And just getting to see that interaction with the kids that last year, whenever I didn't ban phones during my pride time, they would, whenever they would get downtime, they would just pull out their phones and they would be isolated in a room full of other people. And that to me has been one of the biggest things that I've seen in my classroom, that it's a little bit noisier than it was when they could use their phones. But in this day and age, I don't necessarily know that that's always a bad thing.
Yeah, I think whenever you implement a policy, the student perspective is always going to be pushback, like what Katie said, right? And especially if they're used to being able to utilize something and now they're not, or it doesn't matter if it's, you know, personal devices, or if you had an open lunch and now you're not allowing open lunch, you're gonna feel some kickback. And over time, those things can mend themselves, and it becomes the norm at some point in time. I think with the struggle we see still a little bit is there are some teachers who may believe that the device itself, a personal device, when we're speaking personal device specifically, can be beneficial or utilized in the classroom. And just like I talked about earlier, that can cause some friction within the dynamic of your staff. And for us, it's you know, I know our high school principal just went through another activity of you know, annually, maybe it's like he did this year, checking to see if is this still the policy with which, you know, we all can support, and having some of those detailed conversations. But some of your teachers who teach contents that or have teaching styles that may be different than others who direct instruct a lot, can often see that personal device as a tool. The device that you provide to students in your school districts could also determine whether or not teachers see that there's a need for the use of personal device. I just think of there's that commercial, the Apple phone, where they're literally filming a movie utilizing the device. We have students who or staff who utilize project-based learning to help students kind of share their knowledge rather than traditional test. And a 4K phone is going to record better than you know, some other device that you may have in your school, and so they may see reasoning for that. A photography class may try to utilize the phone settings that aren't on a Chromebook, for example. If it was a Chromebook, that the teacher may find benefit in utilizing, and so those are specific examples, and I think those are things that you have to work through within your organization or your schools to kind of have professional conversations about if you are going to go through with some sort of policy like this.
May I ask a question? I don't know if there's a hand button on this on Zoom, like Teams. Brian or Ava, I don't know how you want to handle that. Just calling me, or is that all right?
Yes. When we open up questions, if you could raise your hand, I believe it's under reactions. But yes, you're totally fine.
I see it. Wait. Oh, there it is. Okay, found it. Thank you.
Yep, there you go.
So two questions. I guess from what I'm hearing from the panelists, uniformity seems to maybe work best. And it sounds like, if I heard from the three panelists, that is not the case in your schools. It's kind of a teacher by teacher. So I guess my question is, what struggles have you had with enforcement if there is no uniformity policy? And what struggles have you had just in general enforcement? Do you have those little cell phone bags that are magnetic that stop it, or do you have those little pouches in your classroom, or is it kind of a, hey, keep it in your locker room or keep it in your backpack, I don't want to see it? What policies have you guys initiated to ensure there's enforcement?
Well, I will say we have uniformity in our policy, so it is building wide, the middle school, no phones, and then high school just during passing period and lunch. They're allowed to have phones. But in the classrooms, we do have the little pouches that you can, like a door hanger, you know, and they're all numbered. And so students can place them in there when they come into class. A lot of students just leave them in their lockers. That's another option that they can choose to. So that's where we see majority of our placement of devices when students do come into class.
So with my school, I guess technically, Ron, it sounds kind of like our high school has the same ban as you. And in my opinion, if they're allowed to use it during passing periods, in my opinion, that's not a ban. Just from what I've seen, I did go to a school where bell to bell, from the first bell in the morning to the ending bell at the end of the day, they were not allowed to have it. So in my class, in my school, we each have phone jail in our room. We can use it or we cannot use it. I used it last year, but I had to put a roster next to phone jail and I had to call out the empty pockets every single day. And if I did not call out the empty pockets every single day, it was the same 3 or 4 kids that, oh, I forgot. Or my mom took my phone, or I'm grounded, or they would put literally a fake phone in phone jail because they have multiple phones. It's bizarre. It's crazy. Um, what I am doing this year is the kids put their phone in their book bags and their book bags go in the back of the room because the research that I've done and the research that I've read, the greater the distance between them and their phone, the less ability it has to distract them and affect their attention. There's an incredible study called Brain Drain that shows even just having their phone next to them has the ability to distract them on the same level as if they had it and were out using it. And even more than that, I know the graph that showed the class in mathematics class that they were distracted by somebody else using their phone. That's in there too, that even if a student is making the good choice of not having their phone out, but if the person next to them does, that has the ability to affect their learning just as much as if they were using their own phone. So ideally for me, it would be the phones in their lockers, but as far away from them as they possibly can, would be my opinion.
Yeah, and I would agree with pretty much everything you guys just said. And we actually do have a band, but I would assume that most of us probably have our phone within reach of us right now. And probably myself included have probably done something on it during this Zoom so far. So I agree 100%. It is a big distraction. The farther you can get away from it, the better. We actually do, we are bell to bell, 8 to 3 every day. The expectation is that it will be in their locker. It's written in our policy that way. I'm not naive. I know most kids have it in their bag. And we're not going and looking for them every day. But if a kid, pulls it out of their bag and someone sees it, it's confiscated. We do not allow them during the passing periods or lunch. And the biggest difference we see, so in the mornings when kids are coming in and they're waiting in the commons before they head to classes, the 8 o'clock bell hasn't rang yet, so they're free to be on their phones. And it's the morning that, they're getting to school, jazzed to see their friends, and it is quiet. And at lunchtime,
with a cell phone violation, but they only had on average about 1.3 violations. So for the majority of the kids who did get a violation, they weren't repeat offenders, which is a positive thing. Ironically, though, our tardies did increase, and I don't know if that's cell phone related or not, but less students had tardies. So just a variety of different data points there that I don't know if they're 100% related to cell phones or not. We did have a major change in our schedule where we had a flex period where students could kind of work on some project-based learning opportunities, and it probably increased their ability and access to their phones at the time prior to the policy. Whereas last year we got rid of that flex period, so it could also have an impact on this next step. But we almost increased our books checked out of the library by almost 200%. So academically, obviously more kids are reading, because they need something to do during the school day.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Tanya, am I saying it correct? You raised your hand?
Anna.
Tana. Perfect.
So here is my question, and I have had students respond to me this way. They have said, Mrs. Hall, why, if we can't have our phone out, is Mrs. So-and-so sitting at her desk with the phone, or Mr. Coach so-and-so with his desk? Have you implemented a policy for teachers in regards to that? Because I do believe that we should model behavior. I'm just wondering if that has been in the schools.
That is something we absolutely at Chanute, when we first did this, we stressed very big with our staff that we have to model this. Now our expectation isn't that staff are off their phone from 8 to 3, but when instruction's going on in the classroom, yes. And at the high school level, when we are, between classes, if they need to check a text or something, that's fine, or on their planning period. but during the hour, the expectation is that they are not on their phone either. It's because that's a very hard thing to expect out of your kids if you're not modeling it during that time also. So I think that is very important to the successfulness of your program.
And I agree with that. Well, when after I gave my presentation to the teachers at the very, very end of it, and it was Tyler, I think you were the one who said that we've all probably done something on our phones. At the end of my 30-minute presentation, I did a poll and I said, nobody's in trouble at all. But in this 30 minutes, it's been pretty interactive. How many of you have done anything? Because it was on Nearpod. I said, how many of you done anything? Check your email, check a text, just check a sports score. And all but one teacher admitted to doing something on their phone. And my point was, we as adults with fully formed brains can't say no to those notifications. How do you expect your kids to do it? So what I encourage the teachers to, I said, we have to set, we have to be role models here. You separate yourself from your phone. Don't keep it in your desk next to you. Put it in your cabinet. And I am sure to tell my students, I have young children. And so I've told them, I said, I do get notifications on my watch. If the daycare calls or school calls, I will have to answer, but you will not see me on my phone. So I think it's really important that teachers model the same behavior.
We do have the standard KSB policy, which does allow some flexibility for use by staff with their phones and in the classroom. But I also think, kind of to go off of what Katie said a little bit, but change it, there has to be a learning opportunity, right? And I think Katie brings it up. Hey, if there's an emergency with my kid, like that is a different scenario of why we would need to utilize our phone in a classroom setting or step out and use it versus just because of social media or, we want to see like the sports scores or whatnot. And I think that's the one thing we have to consider, this task force has to consider is how do you create this as a learning opportunity? Because at one point in time, notes being passed between kids were also a problem and causing bullying. I was a middle school principal, believe me, I know the trauma that can come from something that's said about somebody. And they still have email in your schools, and there's supposed to be limitations on that. There's other ways to communicate. And what we did know is we had a student who had 96 notifications within a class period, 96 notifications, but majority of that were social media. So is it a phone issue or is it a social media issue? I think there's a little bit of both, but the percentage of that problem is different. And unfortunately, there's only one that we can control more than the other too.
Okay, thanks. I believe Sue is next.
Thank you to the panelists. I had a question. Actually, I kind of have two questions. The first one is, did you do parent training before you went into particularly the school with a total ban? And was that set up like the year ahead that this is going to happen in the next year? And my second question is, I know in our district, we have this automated phone answering system that worries parents that they can't get hold of their family or their family member in the building because of all these selections that they have to make. So I just wondered if anybody else had concern with their office protocol.
I would answer that. We have not had any issues. Oh, I take that back. We've had parents that have used that line before about I need to be able to get a hold of my kid at any time and all that. And I get it. I'm a parent myself. But we tell them all the time, hey, if you want to talk to your kid, you are more than welcome to call us at any time, and we will find your kid for you, and you can talk to them. We're never going to keep a parent from talking to their kid. In terms of training ahead of time, I don't know as I'd say training. We did a lot of communication. We did a lot of notifications, sending out information to our staff, to our community. We do that a lot of times each year, but kind of highlight any major handbook changes. And this was obviously one we highlighted. And then we addressed it at our back to school nights, our open houses, things like that. And then like we do every year since then, we make a big announcement. We remind the students of it on day one. Like, hey, today's your warning. Like today is your warning that's it. We're not giving warnings tomorrow or the next day. And so it's pretty well known now, and that it's going to be enforced, and that it's going to that parents have to come pick up the phone, and it's just it becomes more of a deterrent that way when it happens once. I think saying that just a second ago, that we would be similar to what Ron was saying. We don't have very many students that that are repeat offenders. It happens once, and then that's pretty much it.
I would agree with what Tyler just said.
All right. Thank you. Amy, I believe you were next.
Hi, I'm from Wichita. I've got two elementary kids and one middle schooler, and I'm really grateful that we brought all these great minds together to discuss this topic. I'm really glad that there are students present. So good job, task force, with bringing all these people to the meeting. One thing, Katie, I heard you saying was like differentiating between how are we addressing it for teachers who are grown-ups and kids who have developing brains. And I've been in a lot of these discussions, and I think that was one point that I thought, oh, great, you brought it up early, because it's kind of a slippery slope into adults going, well, I have a little bit of trouble with this, so, you know, it's understandable that kids do, but kind of bringing us back to, we don't want to make the kids' decisions based on how our adult brains react to the situations. We want to make it based on how the kids' brains are, where they are in their development. And then I was interested that was a statement, sorry. The question I have is, when we talk about like equity, and what about, have you had parents push back for using personal devices for school use and for projects? Ron, you were talking about that. Is that a matter of the school doesn't have the tools that they need to teach the lessons, or is it a matter of having personal devices at school?
Yeah, it could be both. Whether it's, you know, I think in some instances it's the staff members utilizing, you know, a resource or a tool, and for us, luckily, we chose a tool that provides a lot more flexibility in the iPad, I guess, that provides a good quality camera. We still have keyboards to do with typing that are, you know, for our English classes or whatnot as well. So, you know, I think it's just, it might be dependent upon the school more or the district.
So I came from a school 2 years ago that we were not one-to-one. We had a lot of technology in our building, but we were not one-to-one. And so if teachers wanted to utilize any kind of technology, if they weren't able to get a laptop cart, they had to let students use their phones. It was the only way. Now I'm in a school that's one-to-one, so there's really not a reason for kids to need their phones. If there's anything that they need to use their phone for, they should be able to get on their Chromebook and use it. So I definitely think having that technology available, that equity thing is going to be really an important piece that we've got to consider when making recommendations.
Yeah, and I would say, Amy, too, we were lucky when we did our one-to-one. We got a lot of training from Apple themselves, and there's a lot of accessibility features that level the playing field for our students on school devices and personal devices as well, right? A hearing impaired and a student with dyslexia, a variety of different exceptionalities, for example, that you have to consider when, especially in these high stakes, you know, testing era that we're kind of moving back towards, that we need to make sure that we level the playing field and give every student the opportunity to have the same success in the classroom. And so we've been really excited about some of those accessibility features for our students, and that we would never want to take those away.
Okay, so we are actually kind of getting close on our time here. So since we have so many questions, we're going to ask that each person states their question, and I'll call you out, and then we'll have the task force answer them all at once here at the end. So I think Lane was the next one. So you can go ahead and ask your question, Lane, and then we'll move on to the next person with a question.
Yeah, question for Mr. Applegate. Does your school have procedure for students to use their phones in class if, for example, I think it was Mr. Barry was saying, for filming video or taking photos, that sort of thing? Or is it more so the fact that you encourage your teachers to think of other ways for students to do their projects and that sort of thing?
Yeah, for the did you want me to answer now? I'm sorry, was I? Or were you going on to other questions?
Um, we might go on. If you would type it in the chat though, since that's a specific one for you, that would be great. Thank you so much. All right, and then I'm gonna say it wrong. Ananya?
Ananya.
Ananya, sorry.
Yeah.
There you go.
My question was like, how can we take into account the mental health implications of these policies, especially for students who may use their phones as a coping mechanism or a way to escape from the real world?
Okay, we'll go ahead and Jose, if you want to ask your question next, and then we'll let our panelists respond after we hear from you and Kathleen as well.
Okay, so my question kind of goes with kind of the students or the schools that banned either social media or phones. Was there any formalized or standard-based digital citizenship training previously, or is it, happening while the ban is happening also? For the schools that ban phones uses in social media, how are you educating students still on how to properly use technology while actively banning them in, a large portion of their day?
Okay, and then on to you, Kathleen, and then we'll let them answer all.
Okay, thank you, Ava. Tyler, you had mentioned, and I think Ron, you did too, that one of the consequences is taking the phone and the parents having to come pick it up. Aside from parents wanting to track kids on their phone all the time, all their locations, everything where they are, a lot of times families don't have landlines anymore. And so one concern that we've had in our building, we do ban them, is sending kids home without their access to 911 or medical emergency. Our kids do go home to houses that don't have parents in them, and so that would concern me with making the parent come to pick them up, especially being on an Army post. A lot of our families can't leave work until 5:30, and I'm sure lots of other places have that same concern too. So just keeping them with you, does that concern you at all, not having that access to possible emergency services if needed?
Awesome. So we'll turn it back over to the panel to answer these questions.
I'll go first. I guess I'll go reverse order, Kathleen. I think you raise a very good point. It has not come up to this point yet. We benefit from a smaller school district. There's only about 750 students. We're a 3A size. But I also understand as a former military brat and stationed last at Fort Leavenworth that that communication piece can be difficult. And I too don't have a landline phone at home, and I have a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a COVID blessing 4-year-old. So he's I don't know when or even though was a transient student because of the military, like I said, those new friends that you're meeting for the first time, you don't have a connection in the school, and maybe that phone is your connection to your peers outside of the school, and it could decrease some anxiety. But at the same time, there are mental health concerns about the algorithms within those social media platforms that continue to impact students negatively. So I think that's a balancing act that I don't know if we can solve as schools, but it's something we have to keep in the forefront of our mind when working with students on a day-to-day basis.
So I would really like to speak on Ananya's question, because this is something that I had seen that some schools, if there's students who, I know I have some students with accommodations that they're allowed to listen to music during homework time and independent work time and things like that. So that would be something that would need to be addressed if they don't have school supplied devices. But there's procedures you could put in place. I know one school said that if students did have that accommodation and they needed a break, they were allowed to go to the office and they were allowed to have some time in the office. And what they found is that over the course of a couple of weeks, they were less dependent on that time and they no longer needed it. And what I think you'll find, I've done so much reading and so much research. If you guys have not read This Anxious Generation, I tell you what, it is worth the time and worth the read, because what they show is that this period between 2010 and 2015, which is what he calls the great rewiring, when everybody started getting smartphones, there's graph after graph after graph that shows starting in 2010 to 2015, the major depression among teens, self-harm among teens, emergency room visits for self-harm, suicide rates, mental health has gone down, alienation in school, all of these mental health issues skyrocketed when everybody had a phone in their pocket. So I think, yes, students maybe feel that this phone is what's going to help them with that anxiety, when at the same time, it is a very good chance that it is what is causing the anxiety. And that's one of the hugest things that needs to be addressed, is the mental health of these kids. If we don't figure this out, it's going to be hard to turn around.
Yeah, some of those, I agree with everything that was just said. A couple of things just specific to our district. The first question for me was about the teachers being able to allow it in certain situations for projects and whatnot. We have allowed it some. For the most part, no. We have other means. We encourage teachers to use we use Chromebooks here at Chanute, which maybe not be as versatile as the iPads, but they get the job done for almost everything we need. So we have allowed it for a few things, but not much. Concerns about kids going home to homes without a phone. I would say 99% of the, I don't know, a few hundreds of calls I've made over the last couple of years, parents always come and pick them up. They just do. It's one of those things they do. And a few times they've said, hey, you know what? Leave it there. I'll pick it up tomorrow. And that doesn't concern me because the parent is going to be there with the kid anyway. If we do confiscate a phone late in the day and there is a issue when we call the parent and tell them, we have given it back to the kid sometimes at the end of the day. We kind of play that off as a case by case, but if a kid's leaving town right afterwards, we don't want a kid driving all the way without a phone or whatnot. So we'd play that, as it comes up. And the digital citizenship question, I'm gonna sit here and say that is a great question, and that's something we have not embraced as much as we need to. We've had little bits here and there, but in terms of a full-fledged curriculum or anything like that, we are failing in that regard, and that is something we definitely need to improve as the years go on.
Awesome. We appreciate each of our volunteers for coming on and speaking to us about their personal experiences with cell phones in high schools. Unfortunately, we have to move on to our breakout sessions, but this will give each and every member on the panel kind of the chance to discuss what they were thinking and kind of how this is going to go. So thank you guys so much.
All right, thank you, Ava. We're now going to place each of you into breakout rooms to discuss anything that you thought really stood out, either from our panelists' discussions tonight, for the research that Peyton shared with us, or from some of the pre-reading that you've done leading into this. There's going to be a member of KSDE staff in each of the breakout rooms, and they're going to take notes, and they will share out some of those findings and summarize those for us.
Before we go to the breakout, which will always be a major part of what we do, you will be mixed over the course of the weeks with different people. But today I want to introduce you to the people that will be facilitating it. I've introduced you to Jake and Gabby and Peyton, and there's three of the six, but I did not introduce Tiffany, wave Tiffany, so everyone knows, and Marissa and Kaylee. And those six people will be facilitating your discussions and taking notes so that we can start to form the policy as we go forward. So with that, Michaela, I think we're going to send everyone to breakout rooms until 5:25.
Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Thank you for participating in our breakout rooms. to kind of go over what we talked about and the main points of each discussion so that voices are heard. We're going to have our secretaries of each group share what they learned, starting with Gabby.
We were part of group 4. We had a great discussion. Our members talked a lot about the importance of education on technology use and defining what a standardized digital citizenship would look like, especially because we need to be setting students up to thrive in a digital environment when they get their first jobs. So that was one of the things we talked about. Our group also talked about that their experience has been that schools often have guidelines that are implemented, but generally those are happening on a case-by-case basis. And they had a great conversation, and I'll kick it over to the next person.
Okay, we would love to hear from Kaylee now.
Hi. So we also first and foremost clarified what digital citizenship looks like in schools. So we clarified that definition, and then we had a discussion about just how on page 15, those 4 norms that the author presents, how that really stood out to us. Kim, especially Whitman, was the one that brought that up, and she actually has a really cool resource. She mentioned phonefreeschoolsmovement.org. And that's going to be pushing out several resources that you guys might be interested in. So she will be sharing that. So you guys will have that as well, which I thought was really cool. And then really the biggest question was, what is our role as educators in digital citizenship? Finding that balance between utilizing technology, but also recognizing challenges and the harmful effects in our schools.
Thank you. Could we hear from Jake?
Yeah, we had similar conversations around digital citizenship. We talked about the difference between the bans within our schools versus the reality. We had a student in our group, and so we had a blast peppering the student with a few questions. We talked about a little bit of the parents and how they interact and kind of their role. And kind of lastly, we did talk about the prevalence of screens in general beyond personal devices and how that fits in there.
Thank you, Jake. Tiffany, would you like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. One of them, can you hear me? Okay, I think I'm off mute. One of the main hitters was there's a need for more like free playtime and less structured time. It seems that schools are kind of doing away with less playtime, like less recess. And then another main point, sorry, let me go through my notes. It's kind of all over the place here. Basically how we as adults have the opportunity to train kids on our interpersonal relationships, and because it's easy to type out, hurtful comments or anything rather than saying it to their face or just having those face-to-face discussions.
Awesome. Next, we'll talk to Peyton.
Okay, our group had a little bit of a different discussion, particularly talking about how buy-in is the most important thing to making sure that enforcement works, not only from students and parents, but also teachers. So really getting that from all of the stakeholders, and then making sure that parents understand that even though they have some safety concerns with the idea of getting rid of phones in schools, that there are a lot of issues that having the phones can cause. And then some examples from school districts did talk about how when they have tried to implement some sort of ban, that they have received a lot of pushback from parents. And in other cases, there have been parents who have really embraced the bans.
Okay, and last but not least is Marissa.
So our group was kind of just hashing out like where it was a lot to take in. So we were trying to just kind of walk through things. One of the things that was brought up was when we're looking at these data slides, what's the context to how parents are thinking that these cell phones are good, bad, or indifferent for their children? Like who was asked, who was interviewed? What is that context so that we can also like personally think about where we're at with that. Our group did talk about the digital citizenship. We did talk about a lot of trading screen time for screen time. Like, yes, we have to call we have to help our kids succeed because we live in a digital world. But if we're talking about the rapid rewiring of the brain, is screen time on a laptop or an iPad the same thing? Just kind of hashing that out. We did have a student in our group, and she brought her her thought process to having her phone on her was a safety in the classroom, where she felt like a teacher might not be utilizing the video camera in their classroom appropriately, and she was able to share that with her parents and share her concern for safety, and it was brought to the school. So on her side, it's taking those phones away completely, absolving, like not holding the schools accountable, or not the schools but the staff accountable from a student standpoint. And then our group, off a little bit of topic, would like to know if there was if these resources, these slideshows, were going to be shared in maybe like a shared drive so that we could all see or go back and reference them later, the slides that Gabby and Peyton had gone over earlier. And I feel like I had to talk really fast to get that in a minute, and I know I didn't do it. So thanks for listening to me ramble.
That's a good question from your group on the materials. We do have a web page for the task force that KSDE will host, and we'll put our minutes and agendas on there. If that would be helpful to add onto the website, we'll go ahead and do that so everyone can go back and access it. Thank you for pointing that out.
Can you share what that website actually is?
I'll send it in the chat so everyone has it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we're kind of wrapping up the end of our meeting, and I really want to thank everybody for being here today and for their engagement. We really appreciate our panelists taking the time to share some of their experiences in their schools. We're going to meet again next week on the 29th, and we're going to continue our discussion of personal devices in schools at that time. Again, we thank you all for being here, and we really just appreciate all of you sharing your thoughts, your expertise, and I think that's going to kind of wrap us up for today.